some of the Jewish or kosher associations in Europe has been saying that this is a clear, distinctive profiling of races, and it is akin to the Yellow Star of the 21st century. How extensive do you think this is when it's only touching the basic food, and people are also saying that you've got all the data being supplied by, for example, the ECG is that, you know, can be used as a qualitative method of, and based on that, whatever that is being profiled by the rest of the political class.
Well, I mean, you have to go back and look at history. I mean, the first move that Hitler made in Nazi Germany was banning religious slaughter. Some of the Muslims, one of the Muslim colleagues actually said, you know, it's the Christians are still trying to win the Crusades, going all the way back. So there is a long history. And yes, I actually have pictures. One of the things I will show is a picture of a piece of meat with a minaret and a Swiss flag on it. You know, there is clearly efforts being made throughout Europe to make life difficult for Muslims. That they're attacking indirectly, trying to couch it in animal welfare terms with the hope that they can get around the European freedom of religion laws. And it is clearly being brought in by politicians who are avowedly Islamophobic as a way to get support from, quote, the animal welfare community, when in fact probably the world's greatest animal welfare person, who is Dr. Temple Grandin in the United States, is very positive about religious slaughter done right. And she has worked with the religious communities, and my work is focusing in the same way. And in my talk, I will talk about all the things we need to do to improve religious slaughter. I'm not here to say what we're doing today is what we ought to be doing. And in fact, the data that a lot of you refer to, all the scientific data, is often on animals that have been poorly handled. It takes more work and more effort to do religious slaughter well. And if you get the data that you're mixing up the data of handling and transport and equipment and noise and all of those issues, and you're blaming it all on the knife cut. That has nothing to do with the knife cut. It is a complex set of variables that as scientists need to be parsed out. And Temple, for example, has two plants, actually happen to be in Canada, that she considers the best two plants for kosher slaughter. They happen to be kosher plants. Nobody has ever gone to those plants. Most of the data is done in plants that we know have problems, that are not doing things right. So how do you then identify that as kosher slaughter? And in fact, I have more than once asked a scientist in Europe, how was the slaughter done, the religious slaughter, to get the answer, I don't know. Now, in science, one of the religion of science is that you give enough information so that the experiments can be reproduced. And when you have within the religious communities a lot of different equipment, a lot of different ways of doing the slaughter, some are good, some are not good. But again, if you don't know how the slaughter was done, how can you take one of those forms of slaughter and generalize? Nobody would in their right mind accept saying that the data from electrical stunning, gas stunning, and banging over the head with the bolt, that we can lump all that data together. But that's exactly what they're doing on the religious slaughter. They're taking, often intentionally, the worst case and generalizing it as if all religious slaughter is done that way.
Groups hell-bent, if I use that word, on introducing these new amendments to the trade labeling
The labeling, yeah.
and do you see that similar Islamophobic or discriminatory movement or measures being implemented back in the States?
Absolutely. Well, back in Europe, the labeling law is again clearly part of a process that is singling out unstunned slaughter. And in fact, if they were truly interested in informing the consumer, again, as I keep pointing out, there are 3 ways of doing stunned slaughter. They're different. People should have a right to choose those. So if you're going to label, let's label everything, which the meat industry doesn't want to do. And in fact, of course, and I'm being facetious, it's a Jonathan Swift modest proposal. This animal had its skull cracked. This animal was electrocuted. This animal was sent to a gas chamber. And this animal was killed, hand-slaughtered, with respect and kindness for the animal. If we want to label, let's label fairly. I mean, if this is about labeling for providing consumer information, they need all that information. And what about telling people that this animal was missed on the first stun, was freaked out, and was then stunned a second time? If you want to give information, let's talk about giving the information. But if it's about only singling out unstunned slaughter, one has to question the motives of the people doing this. In America, thankfully, right now it is not an issue. The government is not involved in regulating it. It is up to the communities how they want to handle it.
But there are also proposals for the government to be scrutinizing whatever's on the packaging, and regardless if it's halal or organic or vegetarian, they should be monitoring what's on the packaging.
Well, there remains, and that's the basis in which we do have laws in the United States for kosher and halal, and they're based on truth in labeling and consumer right to know. If you're going to make a claim, it needs to be honest. So, I mean, to say that something is unstunned or stunned, if it's not, that's just ordinary fraud and can be handled by our trade laws. You can have a separate law protecting Muslims or Jews separately, but the fact is that the states that don't have the law can still go to court because that's dishonest. And fraud in claims, whatever it be, organic, halal, kosher, natural, again, if there's a definition of it and there's a basis for it, you're being truthful. If you make a claim that's not truthful, you can be prosecuted.
Any last word for the industries all around the world who's actually practicing slaughtering every single day?
Well, I'd like to address 2 audiences. One is the meat industry, is that as an industry, we need to get to the point where we're actually would be happy to slaughter in a glass slaughterhouse, and where people can come and see what we're doing and begin to understand that their meat comes from animals that are slaughtered, which is actually much less of a problem in Muslim countries than in Western countries. The other thing I'd like to actually address is to the Muslim community itself, which is that there is sincere and honest disagreement among Muslims about particularly electrical stunning, which is the way that most likely is reversible. And there is disagreement. And the Muslim community needs to discuss these things in a calm and appropriate way, to respect each other and to recognize they may never come to an agreement, and that it's okay. That, again, religions have evolved, and how we interpret our sacred scriptures will vary in parts of the world with different religious leaders. And it's okay to have differences within the community. we don't have to force a consensus when it isn't there. If there is, and it can be developed, it makes life easier for the industry and everybody else. But if there's not, we may need to accept that we will have both stunned and unstunned slaughter, as long as we have a way of informing our Muslim consumers and they can make an informed choice in conjunction with their personal religious leaders. And that's my appeal, because some folks have tried to win the argument. And it's not about winning. It's about respecting and working with each of these communities. And us as scientists, the industry, needs to accept that there are multiple standards. And it's okay, and it does limit some sales. But in the name of religious freedom, we need to respect that.